BOCCHI the Rock's 5th episode presents a significant challenge to our 4 Kessoku Band members, and a challenge familiar to all aspiring musicians, one you see reacted to many different ways, both here in Japan and elsewhere in the world. And this episode simply frames that challenge in one word: growth. What will the path of growth look like for our individual characters, and what growth will Kessoku Band need as a team to be ready for gigging? Although the episode presents a somewhat vague challenge for the characters, this is actually kind of the point, as each member has to look at themselves and the band they're in and decide what inadequacy it is they want to fix, what they feel that growth actually means. And all this with the clock ticking as the episode's eventual final boss is prowling in the shadows at the back of the room. Okay, it's Seika, but I love how she's set up as the big bad in this episode. See, after Kessoku Band's episode 4 meeting about band image, social media, merchandise and such, they're still actually standing on the start line, and the older and wiser Seika seems to know that. See, it's almost like her younger sister and friends are kind of playing at being in a band, ticking all the boxes that they know they should to be in a band, but they haven't quite experienced the necessary reality check yet. And I love how the show even kind of subtly acknowledges that in its ever-brilliant direction. See, up until this point, a third of the way into the show, we haven't actually heard the band play a single note together as a band. From BOCCHI's first audition to join them, to the practice sessions that have happened subsequently, the scene always just cuts away right before the first notes hit, before the first notes strum. It's almost as though they're trying to remind you that the band is just not ready yet. And episode 5 sets us on the journey to change that, because now it's time for them to grow up and become a band. So, let's look at how the plot presents this, and as usual, maybe get into some real-world examples along the way. We start the episode with Kessoku Band's challenge quickly being brought into alarmingly sharp focus when Nijika, the cheerful band founder, asks her sister to book them in for another live performance at the venue, Starry. However, older sister Seika shuts her down quickly, stating that their band just isn't up to the required standard yet. Seika further elaborates that their previous outing playing at the venue had been a simple act of one-time generosity from an older sister, nothing more. Upon hearing the reaction and the reasoning, Nijika storms out, enraged by Seika's bluntness. However, Seika does send an offer after her little sister that sets episode 5's story in motion. She offers them one audition, one chance, show some growth. And although this episode is painted as the story of the band trying to pass said audition, the reality is we're treated to a half hour of watching the individual characters try to work out what growth even is. See, in reality, this is the moment of realization many bands have, that enjoying what you do just isn't enough on its own. You have to be on par with or better than all the other bands out there who want the stage time just as much as you do. But how do you earn that stage time and show that you're on that level? I mean, being good enough could be perceived as an issue of musicianship, showmanship, marketing, contemporary relevance, but at the end of the day, it's all going to come back to you to look at yourself and decide what you think you need to do to earn that coveted place in the spotlight. It's not even like this issue is just for new artists, as ugly phrases like selling out or becoming pretentious are usually just simple descriptions of more established artists facing the exact same problem of trying to maintain their place on the stage, and maybe doing it the wrong way. A band is a complex thing, and so band growth is rarely just a train track going in one direction. It's a journey that continues your entire career and very rarely has any signposts telling you where to go, except for occasionally looking at the mistakes of those who came before you. So please excuse this momentary piece of pseudo-philosophy, but sometimes the best thing is to just be honest to yourself and find the path forwards from within. So what better way to review this episode than to look at how it frames each of the girls' individual approach to growing. And let's start with Nijika, the band's founder and instigator of most of their progression up until this point. Despite her importance, her character had so far been the least developed, well, beyond her surface level role as the cheery one in charge. So when the ever-bubbly Nijika hits Kessoku Band's first real resistance to their progression, and it's her sister Seika, it's like a happy-go-lucky train smashing into a brick wall. And in the ensuing explosion, we see her lose her composure for the first time, and this gives us our first insight into the more human and true personality behind that happy-go-lucky, joyful expression. As upbeat as Nijika always appears to be, it's a face she chooses to wear, and we see how easily it can be torn away by such a small rebuttal, causing such a massive overreaction. It's important to remember that from Nijika recruiting both Ryo and Bocchi at seemingly socially awkward moments, to her cheerfully pushing past Hitori's negative introversions, and then even glossing over Kita's reappearance, we've fallen into thinking Nijika is rather one-dimensional because she just glides over problems via the line of least resistance. Her sister, however, presents no simple workaround, and that elicits a very different reaction. To be clear though, Nijika ended up as the subtle hero of this episode by the end, countering her initial outburst with a newfound self-awareness. We know that she's a dreamer, and we know that this band is her dream, and therefore it's her dream to lose. However, her sister is much more rooted in reality, maybe having lost that childlike dream and innocence along the way somewhere, and sees that Nijika just can't proceed until she gets more realistic. Seika's blunt way of delivering the frustrating blow is clearly designed to provoke a response, to jolt Nijika awake, and boy does she get that response, as her little sister storms away in a speedy tantrum whilst blurting out a personal secret about Seika needing cuddly toys to get to sleep. That itself leads to the ever-inappropriate Ryo immediately jumping into the space vacated by fleeing Nijika to dryly support these assertions with photographs that she seems to have creepily taken over Seika's sleeping body and has no problem whipping out to show her directly at an already charged moment, delivering a great laugh-out-loud moment in the middle of a core dramatic scene. Back with our band leader though, and after her initial outburst, Nijika starts to cool down and become more realistic. And from here on out, we see a fascinating change in Nijika occur over this episode, as she starts to subtly notice the reality of her dream band as it stands around her. Imperfect, but worthwhile. It's an utterly wonderful piece of writing how they show this so subtly in her actions, as she returns to being the cheery motivator of the band, but with an awareness creeping in. Not replacing her dreamer's smile with the weight of maturity, but showing moments where a newfound awareness occasionally makes her think twice. This comes through in a pivotal scene where she notices a stressed Bocchi in the practice room and thus suggests bringing the rehearsal to a premature end, under the pretense of everyone deserving a rest. Once everyone has left though, Nijika chases Bocchi down the street for a quick one-to-one chat. She's still Nijika, the chat is light, positive and brief with tons of smiles, but she wants to make it clear that she knows Bocchi has inadvertently been wrapped up into this whole band project without even being asked if she wanted to do any of it. In giving the ever-passive Bocchi a way out of the band, should she wish, or an opportunity to object to the band's direction at very least, Nijika's accepted that her dream team might not always want to pull in the same direction. She's accepted an issue that she might have previously glossed over and addressed it directly. Even if Bocchi has no real objections to the band in reality, they both kind of walk away from that conversation and that scene a little bit happier, I'm sure. Certainly feeling closer to each other and more honest. In this and several moments, we see Nijika become a more realistic band leader, while still the ever-cheerful dreamer, offering genuine encouragement to Kita, honesty to Bocchi, and increasingly calling out the ever-strident Ryo. She's kind of becoming more in control of her band and in control of her own emotions. And speaking of which, Ryo's journey takes a somewhat hilarious route of its own as she throws every trick in the book at trying to show band growth in the most cunning ways possible. See, Ryo is an experienced musician who already very much knows what she wants. She's just looking for the right band to express herself, and perhaps her ego as well, as Ryo spent the latter half of episode 4 verbalizing to Bocchi in a much more eloquent way. In this episode, she continues her usual indifferent honesty and witty observations. See, after annoying Seika with the aforementioned sneaky pictures, she suggests the band pass the audition by getting Kita and Bocchi to mime to a pre-recorded backing track so as to cover for their musical shortcomings. This ticks all the Ryo personality boxes, as she's genuinely trying to use a wise technique to smooth the band's path forwards, but whilst being completely oblivious to her bandmates' feelings, proven by the fact that her comments actually kickstart some doubts in Kita. But Ryo has no time for that, as she's a bigger picture thinker, putting the end goal of the band dream first, somewhat like we said about Nijika, but replacing that cheerful dreamer persona with more of a dog-eat-dog ambition. Even if her backing track idea is flawed and quickly rejected, it's very much a band-focused, use every trick going, blunt Ryo kind of tactic. By contrast though, her second attempt to make the band more palatable is shown when Nijika arrives at Starry to see Ryo has decorated all the other members with mop-top haircuts and suggesting they wear a uniform androgynous look with a band image of carefree smoking, drinking and fraternizing with girls. I've got to admit, however, that this is actually the one scene that kind of felt a little bit off to me, as it seemed to be playing for the joke at the expense of the character's development. I mean, to review, isn't this the same Ryo who at the end of the previous episode said losing your identity is the death of the artistic self? The same Ryo who wanted a more honest Bocchi? The Ryo who left her previous band for mimicking trends in order to become popular? The same Ryo who already had an idea of how they could become more unique and less of that stereotype that she said she hated? I mean, the more I started thinking about that scene, I started thinking as well, who bought the matching outfit, suits and wigs if Ryo is always broke, and how did the ever self-conscious Bocchi end up agreeing to sport such a look upon request? That said though, I must admit that in the same way that this scene kind of stood out as not quite feeling like it fit in, it did in that whole process highlight just how superb a tightrope BOCCHI the Rock is often walking in its writing, combining great character development, stories, realism and comedy into sub 30-minute episodes. In a lesser show, I would perhaps not even notice that this one scene felt a little bit out of place, but in the ever-detailed Bocchi world where everything feels so real and consistent, even in its most flamboyant moments, I should say, the fact that I couldn't help but think, hey, this seems out of character, shows how believable the show otherwise is. Anyway, regardless of this brief oddity, by the end of the episode we see Ryo become more of a team player, noticing that her tricks, however clever, didn't unite the band. By the end though, we really see Ryo coming together with the band on stage. We see her listening to Nijika's lead a little bit more, and we even see her training Kita on guitar like a true senpai. And speaking of Ryo's kohai, Kita, she may have relatively few scenes in this episode, and yet we see her take the mission statement probably the most to heart of any of Kessoku Band's members, especially after Ryo and Nijika's initial concerns about her readiness. See, even before this, Kita has felt 2 steps behind her bandmates ever since they found out that she couldn't actually play guitar. And despite their help and her improvement, Kita doesn't want to be a burden. So she does the one thing she can. The one thing any well-adjusted, cheerful and kind-hearted person who wants to do better would do. She works damn hard. She works until her fingers are sore. She recoils at the thought of a rehearsal ending early. She just puts in the work. Kita continues to be such a positive light in the band, but as with Nijika, they're not just stupid grinning faces. Nijika's a more motivated dreamer, yes, but Kita is a hard-working grafter, not fooled by her own popularity. The few times we see Kita in the middle of this episode, she's playing until her fingers are sore. She doesn't feel owed the success and won't simply settle for being good enough. Kita's on a mission, and it's simply to grow into the musician she promised the others she would be. And this audition is her chance to prove that they didn't misplace her trust in her. Given the stereotypes of anime pretty girls and the fact that Kita's clearly positioned as the pretty girl of Kessoku Band, I found it refreshing that she's also shown as possibly the hardest working of the 4 when push comes to shove. However, meanwhile, Bocchi is also on her own mission, practicing hard since Ryo and Kita's harsh early suggestion also included her. But Bocchi finds herself more struggling with another voice inside. See, her journey thus far has taken her from being a semi-popular video uploader, yes, she still has more subs than me, to being in a real-life band. But this whirlwind ride has been more about her following the opportunities that have been presented to her and that will hopefully lead her to her original goal of being a beloved rock star. You may notice though that in none of her dream sequences about being famous did we ever really see or notice a band beside her. And this is for a reason, because Bocchi's been wrestling with her seemingly selfish motivations for a while, even lying awkwardly, if somewhat hilariously, about them to Kita previously. A matter made worse when Kita again references her belief that Bocchi is so incredibly pure of heart, and yet in another great writing move and piece of character development, the lovable Bocchi is depicted as owing her friends a little more trust. They've all taken her into their dreams, but now it's time for her to accept they're part of her dream too. They're a family, or they're nothing. However, this understandably stems from the fact that Bocchi simply never worked in a team before. I said this a million times before, and I'll likely say it a million times more. There's one primary reason why bands break up in reality, and it's simply when the members don't find their places in the team. Worst typified by the musicians who see their mission as separate from the team, see their ego probably as bigger than the thing that they're part of. When they don't realise that they're encroaching on a fellow bandmate's role or position in the band, or when they don't appreciate what each of the other band colleagues brings to the band dynamic, or perhaps they just don't agree with what the dynamic is. If you've ever heard that phrase, creative differences, 9 times out of 10, this is what it boils down to. Would John and Paul have lasted long enough to make all those hits if they had a beloved visionary drummer instead of the solid ego-free timekeeping Ringo at the back? Has Scandal's incredibly long run with no member changes not been aided by each member being free to write their own songs, sing, and never have a celebrity image of their own that was bigger than that of the band? See, band dynamics can look very different, but everyone needs to be on board with what that dynamic is. Everyone needs to know the score, know how they fit into it, and everyone needs to be glad for it. Many things might change you as people, as time goes on and your own lives go on, but so long as you can find that place in the band and still be happy with it, the band will keep on going. In this episode, we see Kessoku Band having the realizations that will hopefully take them to this place of mutual appreciation and teamwork. Nijika being more realistic about the trials of band life, Kita meeting the standard the band expects of her as a musician, Bocchi learning that she has to be in it for the team and not just herself, and even Ryo not elevating the band mission too high above its human members. And yes, this all leads, as we said, to the final audition, the final boss, the final test. Did they grow enough for Seika? Well, firstly, it's finally that moment that we get to hear them play as a band. And yeah, I've done separate reviews of Kessoku Band as a musical act on my main music channel, but needless to say, the way they're presented here at this pivotal moment is bright and fun. Kita's voice is absolutely brilliant, straying from the lightness of her spoken tone to a more powerful energy, akin to her karaoke reputation. The song itself is lively and interesting with introverted lyrics just as Ryo had intended and as Bocchi had penned. It's a great song, not world-changing by any means, but the fact we were made to wait before hearing the band play together, it just makes it all the more rewarding. And our love for the characters means that the complete sound of this catchy pop rock song is like the director nodding at the fact that they are now a complete band and we can therefore get to enjoy them. They play out the scene beautifully, and I love the way it's directed, watching the members move to the music, which I believe was drawn over video of live performance, and again is all the better for it. It's that catharsis in their body language, their relief in playing, getting lost in the music. However they did it, the true joy of music just comes across much better in this scene than I would really expect any animation to be able to portray. And so here are Kessoku Band on stage, working together, released from their stresses together, and they all just look at each other across the stage with a knowing respect that shows they are a band. Regardless of Seika's final judgment, whatever it may be, they are a band now. Now, spoiler alert, they obviously passed the audition. I don't think anyone really saw this episode ending in any other way. However, as I mentioned before, BOCCHI the Rock doesn't seem to be about big dramas so much as personal reflections, insights, and what it means to become a musician. The characters learn to overcome themselves rather than any contrived barriers, and thus it's easier to set aside the conveniences of a caring older sister who clearly was always going to give Kessoku Band more stage time, being the big bad they had to face up to at the end. So the band conclude with joyous hugs and a lovely full split from the emotional intensity when Bocchi vomits her post-performance anxiety out, whilst we as the viewers get to see live action video of various dams from around Japan expelling water. It's a nice feeling, and for all the trials and tribulations, Seika never wanted the band to trip and stumble. She just wanted to remind them to not get complacent and lazy, to step up and make their dreams a reality. It's an important thing to learn, and this episode's real lesson is perhaps the most important one you can give any musician. There's no silver bullet. There's no magic answer to how your artistic endeavours should proceed. There's no line you have to necessarily cross. You've just got to be self-aware enough to not let it all go to your head and keep a strong work ethic throughout. You keep doing that and you'll probably be in with a shot. But either way, Kessoku Band have shown their toughness to be a real band, and that's the takeaway from this episode. But episode 5 does nicely serve us up a few little plot threads to look forward to as well. Firstly is the amusing adventure of Bocchi trying to find at least 5 people to whom she can sell tickets for the now upcoming show, a story thread which already seems slated to return us to some of the classic Bocchi introversions from earlier in the series. Meanwhile, Seika's newfound fascination in Bocchi after the performance implies that she may well be looking to elevate Bocchi to an uncomfortable position that could bring her into conflict with the rest of the band. But once again, these are all matters for the next episode. So let's see where Bocchi takes us next. And I wanted to take this moment, by the way, to give a big thank you to the number of people who've left kind comments on these videos. I'm new to anime despite living in Japan, and I do try my best to not get boring and waffle on about the music side of things that I know more about too much, as I know us musicians have a well-earned reputation for such boring rants. So just keep on giving the feedback. I really hope you enjoyed this episode. I'm looking forward to covering more of these for you, and I'm absolutely listening to and appreciating all of your comments. So, hopefully, I'll see you soon.